Future EU member states could be put on probation as part of measures by Brussels to stop what they describe as possible Trojan horses from infiltrating the bloc. So, will this truly safeguard Europe's unity or create a two-tier union? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, the European Union is changing its approach to growing the bloc after a decade-long hold on admitting new members. EU Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos wants to ensure new member states share and align with European values. It comes as candidate countries like Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia and other nations in the Western Balkans are attempting to speed up their accession.
The European Union's grand vision of enlargement is colliding with some rogue members. Hungary under Viktor Orban has become the bloc's most persistent challenge, obstructing aid to Ukraine and sanctions on Russia, which he has maintained close ties with. Determined to prevent any more confrontations with other member states, Brussels is proposing a new safety net for future members. Probation periods and tougher post-accession checks to catch backsliding before it takes root. As the bloc courts Ukraine, Moldova and others from the Western Balkans, the message is clear: no more Trojan horses through the gates.
We need to ensure that positive dynamics on the rule of law, democracy and fundamental rights are maintained also after accession. Future accession treaties will need to contain stronger safeguards while keeping the fundamental principle of equality.
Currently, EU member hopefuls have to meet the Copenhagen criteria, which includes stable democratic institutions, rule of law and human rights, functioning market economies, and the ability to adopt EU laws and obligations. The new rules will add to the frustrations of some candidate countries, which have been waiting more than a decade, including Albania, Montenegro and Serbia, with the latter accused by Kos of backsliding on EU values and principles.
We are facing thousands of doubts from different member states because of our relationship with Beijing, with Moscow. I cannot and I'm not going to justify myself for talking with someone.
The Commissioner's message may be blunt, but reflects a Europe wary of members who benefit from its billions in investment while aligning themselves with countries that hold conflicting values.
Well, let's get into this one. Joining me in the studio, I'm delighted to say we have Gunnar Beck. He's a legal academic and a former member of the European Parliament. In Brussels, we have Philipp Lausberg. Philipp is policy analyst at the European Policy Centre. And in Arizona, in the United States, we have Ljubomir Filipovic, who's a Montenegrin political scientist focused on foreign influence and information integrity. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Ljubomir, I'll come to you first of all. Let's begin at looking, why do you think the European Union might be wanting to put in place probation measures for any new joiners? What's your suspicion here?
First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's nothing new, to be honest. It's just another way. It's a series of tactics for the EU that is used for over the decade now, just to keep the narrative of enlargement going, without clear commitment to do some real steps, to do some real work. So probationary period gives us some kind of liminal two-tier membership within the EU, trying to put safe measures or to kind of ensure itself from possible risks that the new potential troublemakers, how they see the candidates, can make when they join the EU. So basically, it shows, unfortunately, that Europe is still not ready for the real full enlargement of the Union.
Philipp, that's an interesting phrase that Ljubomir has just used there, two-tier membership. Is that the worry here, that we end up with a European Union where we've got one trusted group of members and then newcomers as they come will be deemed slightly suspicious of?
Well, I wouldn't say so, because I mean, this is supposed to be a probation period, and we all know probation periods are temporary. In business, they're usually half a year. Here, they're going to be maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years. That's something that hasn't been decided yet. But we are in a very tense geopolitical moment, and the region that the possible newcomers are coming from are in a very tense geopolitical region. So, given that, and also some experiences with former members that have been rather blocking rather than, bringing ahead the European interest in the EU, and not always aligning with the core founding principles, I think it's only fair to be a little bit more careful. And also considering that nowadays there's a lot of, still skepticism among many member states. If you want to convince member states to vote for enlargement, I think you need to convince them that the newcomers will also play by the rules. And that can also be then a further argument that those countries can use at home to make a case for enlargement.
So you agree with this, Philip? You're in favour, yeah? You're in favour?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Philip. Gunnar, to you, I mean, this is quite a prudent measure. Are you in favour of it?
I wouldn't necessarily call it prudent. Let me make 4 points, perhaps. Okay. First, I think Philip said everyone should be playing by the rules. Well, I agree in terms of this abstract proposition. But of course, the EU is all too often not playing by its own rules. It's often violating its own treaty provisions. Practically nothing that's been done in the EU over the last 10 years has really been done in accordance with the wording and the spirit the treaties originally entered into. Point two, and I think that was hinted at by Vladimir, no, I think by Philip too, not everyone is happy about rapid enlargement. I agree with it. There is some disagreement amongst existing member states, so this kind of probationary period is in part a response to these concerns. Third point, it could of course also be a delaying tactic for precisely the reasons I've outlined, because not everyone is in agreement. Now, I myself think Europe should be more prudential than you've suggested, not because I'd like to exclude anyone, but because I think Europe is in a deep economic crisis and shouldn't shoulder any more tasks it currently has. The European Union has, over the last 10 years, developed increasingly imperial ambitions, and I think enlargement is an expression of it. Any delay in that regard, I think, is welcome. And fourth, well, I think that's perhaps my greatest fear. Probationary means you'll have tests and criteria. So clearly, this is also, at least in part, another way of strengthening central, namely EU, controls over member states. So there's more scope for interference, there's more scope for meddling. And I think that's my greatest concern here.
Thanks, Gunnar. Ljubomir, back to you. We heard a phrase from Marta Kos, who's the Commissioner for Enlargement in the European Union. She used the phrase Trojan horses, that she's worried about Trojan horses for Russia getting into the European Union. Just let's have a discussion about what she meant there and who she might have been pointing the finger at.
So I understand that there is a concern of growing Russian influence within the EU, but you already had members you could define as Trojan horses if you don't want to be politically correct. So the Hungarian and Slovakian foreign policy, their decisions were those who were supportive of Russia and were a thorn in EU's side during the last 5 or 10 years. But on the other side, you had some candidate countries, just like Montenegro or Albania, that were aligning themselves with European foreign policy for more than 15 years. You can be suspicious of Serbia, definitely, because Serbia, up to this day, doesn't want to introduce sanctions towards Russian Federation and has been used as a tool to avoid sanctions for certain Russian companies and individuals. But we don't, we need to understand that negotiation process is a probation itself. So we've been going through, for example, Montenegro has been going through negotiation process since 2012. So for 13 years. So if we are going to be put on a probation period within the EU for the next 5 years, so what could the other countries in Western Balkans expect? It was 20 years ago since Montenegro started its road to accession, and definitely you can understand why is there not only fatigue from the EU side, but why is there a fatigue on the candidate side who once perceived the European Union as a tool for their transformation, not so much anymore.
Thanks, Ljubomir. Philipp, that's a very interesting point, isn't it? That the negotiation period, which runs to many years now, is in itself a form of probation.
It clearly is, and it has worked like that before. And of course, the Copenhagen criteria are strict. There's a lot of conditions that countries need to meet. There are a lot of so-called clusters they have to go through until they can finally join the EU. And that has generally worked well in the past, but we have also seen that countries that join then turn against the very principles of the EU. And that has happened, and I think we're going to talk about that a bit more in detail later. But I think it makes sense to brace against that and to say, maybe let's wait for 2 or 3, elections and see if after that, the rule of law is still being respected, if media freedom is still in place, and so on. And if that's the case, then you can move from that sort of probation period to the proper membership.
But Philipp, the point remains that in the last, 12 years, only one country has entered the European Union, one new member state, that being Croatia. That's not a huge kind of strike rate, is it? I mean, they really do move at a glacial pace here, the EU.
That is true, but looking at the map and seeing the countries that would be next in line are also in more geopolitically contested areas where it just takes longer, I think, and some of the countries also come from a lower economic standard and other standards. So I think it makes sense to take to take your time. Then another important factor is also the internal willingness and the capacity for the EU to take on more members. And in 2013, the EU was still in the midst of the euro crisis. That is now luckily behind us, but that has occupied the Europeans with themselves for quite some time. And I think the latest enlargement push has only come since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, when it became clear that the neighborhood is very contested, that a lot of great powers are trying to, move into this space and challenge, European interests in its very neighborhood. So the European, core security interests are also at stake here. And I think that's why the acceleration that we're seeing right now. But in general, of course, I think the aspiration or the idea is, of course, of European integration to have the whole of Europe in there. But again, this depends on the conditions that are present.
Thanks, Philipp. Gunnar, how much do you think Russia's war in Ukraine has kind of sharpened the EU focus in terms of getting these countries in or accelerating what is a very slow process?
It is a very slow process, and I think it's been well described already. Well, it's clearly, I think, given rise to security concerns in some parts of Eastern Europe. And I think it's nothing new if smaller aspirants to EU membership see EU membership as a way of buttressing their own security. At the same time, we have to remember that the EU, of course, is not yet a military organization. The appropriate organization for that sort of thing should really be NATO, so that distinction isn't always properly understood, and it's not always properly made.
Thank you, Gunnar. Let's look at Montenegro then. Ljubomir, give us your impression. How big a talking point is joining the European Union for them?
It's quite a topic. It's been like I said before, a transformational force for Montenegrin reforms. So what we've experienced is even the accession process itself, the negotiation, opening and closing chapters, already brought some benefits when it comes to quality of life and reforms and the rule of law, and people are experiencing this. So Montenegro has unprecedented consensus among political elites for that EU is something that's beneficial for Montenegro. So you have almost no political, for sure not mainstream political forces, even those who are on far right or far left, that are against the EU membership. When it comes to public, the percentage of support went from 80% to 70%, but it's in that range for the past 10 or 15 years. Unlike Serbia, for example, when the support for the membership went down to 40-35%. But what's happening is that a lot of people are supporting the membership and accession to the EU for economic reasons, while none of them are ready to accept the values that are enshrined in European Union documents and the structure. So there's a bit of discrepancy there. And just like you mentioned, how the time goes and these membership criteria are shifting and the messages are becoming more and more ambiguous, you have a problem that not less and less people believe in that European dream. And that opens a space for the third party foreign malign influence. And I think that's not anymore only our security problem. It becomes European security problem too.
And Ljubomir, can I just ask, would you find it offensive then if the EU said to Montenegro, yes, we'll let you in, but we're a little bit suspicious and we're going to put you on the probation step for 5 years? Do you think Montenegrins would find that offensive?
Yeah, I'm not sure about how many Montenegrins would find that offensive, but objectively, it's an offensive thing to do. Not only by our standards. If you look at it, it's a demeaning. You need to put yourself into a demeaning position, and this is being exploited, but by the very same foreign actors, third-party actors that Europe is allegedly trying to prevent the influence from.
Thanks, Ljubomir. I want to bring Philipp back in. Philipp, we come back to your point about a two-tier European Union. That is clearly what they're going to create.
No, I don't agree. I don't think this is about a two-tier European Union. It's just about a limited period where, I think talk is more about being able to, suspend some voting rights or things like that if this country gravely goes against what's in the treaties. So as long as that doesn't happen, every accessed country will have all the benefits of EU membership: access to the single market, access to cohesion funds and other funding, and so on and so forth. It is literally just if you hijack, the political process that has been done already before by, going to accession, then you are under the threat of losing some of your voting rights. And I think that is also, I would say, in favor of those forces in those countries who want to see their countries in the European Union, because they would of course also suffer in case these countries would slide back towards a more authoritarian way of ruling. So I mean, while I understand, I understand the concern that was voiced, that it is maybe it doesn't look nice, maybe, but in the end of the day, when we look at the facts and if we look at what it actually means, it doesn't have any effect unless you have a government backsliding towards authoritarianism.
Thanks, Philip. Gunnar, Viktor Orban is clearly a character that Brussels struggles with. Do you feel European leaders have had their fingers burnt a bit? That he won't play the game, he doesn't do what they want, and there are suspicions that he has a very good relationship with Moscow and the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin, and that he's not exactly on side with what the European Union wants to do?
Well, I think you're presenting it in a slightly one-sided way. He has apparently a good relationship with President Putin of Russia. He also has an excellent relationship with President Trump. So in other words, I'm not so sure what he's doing wrong in terms of the interests of his country. I think he's trying to have good relations with everyone, whereas the European Union is obviously on a collision course with Russia over reasons one may understand, but it's not necessarily always helping the peace process. So in that sense, I think it highlights the point I already made, that within the European Union, there are very considerable differences of opinion over the future course to take. Prime Minister Orban is at the helm of, say, the minority skeptical camp. He doesn't agree with much of von der Leyen's rather authoritarian policies. And of course, the European Union is now thinking of alternative ways of establishing membership, partly, I think, in order to extend its control over the formation of political opinion in these new aspirant member states. I think the great danger here is that the European Union, which purports to be a haven for the rule of law and democracy, falls ever shorter of its own ideals. The European Union, I've already hinted, is regularly disregarding the wording of its own treaties. And in terms of democracy, there's hardly any in the European Union.
Thanks, Gunnar. Just to you, Ljubomir, give us a prediction then, a couple of predictions, please, if you will. How long until Montenegro gets in, and who will be the first country to get in? I'm looking at some of the leaders here behind me. Albania, Ukraine is there, Georgia, your country, Montenegro. What's going to happen?
So over the course of my lifetime, we heard a lot of those dates. We heard 2012, 2016, 2020, 2018, so now the politicians are promising to us that 2028 is the year. So we're becoming 2028 member state on 2028. The latest messages are telling us that Montenegro is a front runner. It has the most chapters, negotiation chapters open and closed. So realistically, if everything goes right, if there are no major geopolitical or political storms in the country, we might expect that negotiation process to end by the end of next year. So then there is a period where we need to communicate and sign the agreement itself, and then realistically, everything goes right, we could be a new member state by 2028. We have heard that, again, I'm repeating, from our politicians, from our political elites, but we haven't heard that from the EU itself. So the year 2030 is mentioned. Some of them are talking about Montenegro and Albania being in the first enlargement package. Montenegro is quite convenient for the EU membership. Why? For several reasons. Montenegro has 600,000 population. It's already a NATO member. Unilaterally, we already introduced euro. We're using euro since 2002. And it wouldn't be a shock economically and politically for the EU to accept Montenegro as a member. And by doing so, it's a cheap bargain because you're accepting a small member state with no great political risks, and then you're sending out the message that enlargement is still alive. I'm not sure how much will this work for other possible member states in the future, but I'm not optimistic for the others.
Thanks, Ljubomir.
To be honest.
Let's finish with Philipp. Philipp, just very briefly, do you think Montenegro is the next country to get in?
I think Montenegro and Albania are the next in line. I agree. And I think what Ljubomir said about them being already in NATO, being not too large, being not in a region that is currently, where there's a war nearby. I think these are all things that make it easier. Plus, I think the progress that has been made in these countries is also quite substantial. So I think it would be also easiest to get the support in the European Council from all the member states. So my understanding is that they will be next, yes.
Thank you, Philipp, Ljubomir and Gunnar Beck here in the studio with me as well. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.